Hey guys, Sam here, and welcome to another review. And yeah, this has been long overdue. I said I was going to do this, and now it's here. My review on the first season of My Adventures with Superman. Before I get into it, allow me to tell you something about myself. When I was growing up, I watched a lot more Batman and Spider-Man related media than Superman. Now, I'm not saying I didn't like him. I knew the story, some of his villains, his friends, and his main love interest, Lois Lane. But I guess I just respected Superman more than loved him when I was younger. How do I know that? Well, I did watch the Spider-Man Raimi films all the time. As for Superman Returns with Brandon Routh and Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor, I will admit there were times where I tried to watch it and I fell asleep. So if me as a little kid couldn't get through it, I don't even want to know how it would be if I was an adult. So anyway, like I said, I just respected Superman more than loved him when I was younger. At least not as much as I love Batman, Spider-Man, and a few other heroes. But I do understand Superman's cultural impact. And like Batman and Spider-Man, we have seen Superman at his best, his worst, and at his most controversial in terms of film, video games, and shows. There are plenty, unlike me, that grew up with Superman in lots of animated DC shows in the 90s and 2000s. But aside from the 90s animated series and a few spin-off movies, he was mostly put in ensemble shows and movies like Justice League and Injustice. Simply put, I didn't have a Superman show that I could watch and truly get invested in, like a diehard fan would. Until now. First, let me say this so I don't piss some people off. This is not a perfect show. Like any other show, it has its flaws, and we will talk about them. But at the same time, I will be talking about what this show does right and how it does bring some new life into this iconic character. So for this review, it will simply be me going over a lot of what happens in the first season, which means that there will be spoilers. You have been warned. I won't give away every single spoiler, but I think you'll understand. Also, I won't have time to do a fun fact section or joke section like in my other reviews. It will simply be me giving a summary of the first season, and then you'll hear my thoughts on it. Good. Let's get started. Okay, so the main story does keep some of the same beats we're all familiar with. Clark Kent, aka Kal-El, comes from the distant planet called Krypton. He was sent to Earth when his home planet blew up and was found and adopted by John and Martha Kent in Kansas. Now, here are the new elements in this show. Clark grows up into a man and is roommates with Jimmy Olsen in an apartment in Metropolis and starts an internship at the Daily Planet where he meets Lois Lane. Turns out, Clark, Jimmy, and Lois are all interns, and soon band together to get the big, important stories in Metropolis. Soon, Clark starts to use his gifted abilities to save people and later becomes Superman, but he has no idea who he really is or where he came from. So the rest of the first season is him trying to discover his past and learn more about his people, while also trying to manage his internship, his friendship with Jimmy, a blooming romance with Lois, and dealing with new villains that keep popping up like Livewire, Deathstroke, Parasite, Mr. Mystic Pitalik, and more. There are big robots, lasers, powers, technology, secrets, reveals, dramatic moments, but also sweet and inspirational moments. Okay, let me talk about what I like about the show first, before I talk about the flaws. First off, each of the stories were simple and not too confusing. It takes elements used from other Superman stories, but it still manages to be its own thing. Are all the stories extremely compelling and complex? Not really, but they are all entertaining, fun, got me to laugh sometimes, and smile a lot of the times. But most importantly, it got me to care. The kiss of death for any show is not having any investment in it whatsoever. You can have a good set of ideas, but if they are not executed well, you're gonna lose people. And thankfully, this show not only got me invested, but so many others. There's fan art, a growing fandom, and it did get some decent attention on social media with each new episode. Could some stories be a little rushed? A bit, but I don't think it really damages the show. It didn't suddenly become my new favorite show or anything, but it didn't suddenly become the worst or fall, off a cliff or anything like that. It really just became a show I instantly liked. Next, I really love the art style. I'm sure I'm not the first one to say it, but the show does give off the anime feel, but with a Western animated touch. It can be bright, colorful, and positive, while also being dark, colorless, and negative. As for the animation, I do find it to be good, especially when the action scenes come in. They can be fast-paced and pretty fun. Sometimes the animation can be a little stiff, but it's not really distracting. It's not my favorite animated show based on the animation, but it certainly is a show I can remember with no problem. If someone were to give me a screenshot and ask me what the show is, I would say, oh, that's My Adventures with Superman. Just like how people can take a shot from the 90s show and say, oh, that's the 90s Superman. Simply put, I like how the show looks, which shouldn't come as a surprise. Studio Merco from South Korea did the animation. The same studio that worked on shows like Legend of Korra, the 4th season of Boondocks, Kipo, and the Age of Wonder Beasts, and right now, X-Men 97. Let me know in the comments below if you want me to review that one. The next thing I like is the voice cast. Every one of them does a nice job in their respective roles, from heroes to side characters and to villains. Now, the main characters, Clark, Jimmy, and Lois. They're pretty much the heart of the show, and a lot of critics agree that they pretty much do carry a lot of the weight, and they're a big reason why the show was something that they liked. Jack Quaid is fantastic as both Clark Kent and Superman. He's shy, awkward, but also caring, sweet, and as pure can be. This is a guy who stumbles over his words and is not subtle at all about his crush on Lois. But he's also determined, willing to help anyone in need, and he simply does it because he just wants to help. There's no selfish reasons for it. He's not trying to get fame or fortune or anything like that. He just wants to help. He tries to learn more about himself, his people, his powers, how he can help others, and how to be the best Superman he can be. For portraying a young, naive, but growing Superman, Jack Quaid does a great job portraying that. He's likable, as are Lois and Jimmy. Jimmy Olsen is voiced by Ishmael Zahid. I hope I said that name right. In my opinion, while he's probably the least interesting in the trio, he's still likable, funny, and a solid friend in his own way. Although his running gag about his alien conspiracies did get tired after a while. But I still enjoyed him, and I like how he went from being a content creator with barely any followers to having countless followers, selling his Flamebird brand to the Daily Planet, and becoming rich by the end of the season. I'm honestly happy for him, and say he does a good job in his role. And then there's Lois, voiced by Alice Lee. Like Clark, she's extremely likable. She's optimistic, spunky, determined, a go-getter, willing to take risks to get the truth, and wants to help people in her own way like Clark. But she can also be stubborn, pretty green when it comes to reporting, did use deception on her friends and boss when chasing that big story to change her life at the beginning of the show, and those are things she learns and improves on by the end of the season. Also, compared to other Loises, she is the most distinct to me, which is a good thing because there was an episode where multiple Loises were on screen. Point is, you take one look at her and you know she's from this show. Alice Lee does a great job voicing her. And who knows, maybe she'll bring her singing chops from Heathers the Musical into Season 2? Maybe? We'll see. Also, yes, the Clark and Lois romance is really sweet. Did it bloom too quick in the first season? Maybe a little bit, but I'm glad this show didn't waste too much time doing the will they, won't they thing. It's kind of like what happened with Luce and Amity in the Owl House. True, it did take until Season 2 for them to be a couple, but the show could have easily saved that for the end of the show. Instead, they allow them to get together and show us how the relationship grows for the better. While I do agree Lumity is better than Clois, I still like this romance. I like that Lois falls in love with Clark first, not Superman. It's not just a one-sided crush either. They both make googly eyes at each other. They have great chemistry, and they make each other change for the better. I see the two's romance in Season 1 as truly the beginning of the relationship, and I do hope we see more care and development given to them in Season 2. Now, the villains. Honestly, I found some of them to be cool. Livewire, Deathstroke, General Lane, Parasite, but I think we can all agree that Mr. Mystic Pitalik was the best villain in this season. Not only is he an annoying bugger that you love to hate and watch, not only is he charismatic, funny, deceiving, and not only has incredible magic, but his design is so distinct that it actually looks better than other designs of this character, including what he looked like in the comics. In most versions, comics or shows, he looks like this, a small man with a colorful costume and a tongue twister of a name. But honestly, if I had to imagine what a little man with a jester-like personality and powerful magic would look like, I'd probably think this design is more fitting. And I honestly would love to see more of him in the next season. Livewire was cool, Deathstroke looks different, but I still found to be cool. Parasite is a fun bad guy with the amazing ability to use someone's strength to make himself stronger or bigger. Like anytime you hit him, he just gets much stronger and a lot more bigger. Like he even becomes like almost a Godzilla-like creature by the end of the season. I loved how the show utilized him. I also grew to like General Lane. At first he did seem like a dull stick in the mud, but we do learn more about him as the season goes on. We see his backstory as a young soldier with a young Amanda Waller, and we see why both want to stop any alien invaders coming to Earth, even when one just wants to do good. Of course, having General Lane be Lois's dad and Lois dating the man the father wants to destroy does create an interesting conflict. But I do like how they resolved it. I won't go into too much detail as to how it happens, I don't want to give away every single spoiler, but I will say that it did make me like General Lane more. If you don't like him the first couple times you see him, give it time. I guarantee that you'll begin to like him, or at the very least, understand him better by the end. Also, if you are curious, yes, this guy was confirmed to be Lex Luthor, or Alexander Luthor, anyway, but I don't think he's Lex Luthor just yet, you know what I mean? I bet by season 2 that we'll get to see him as that big bad guy that we remember. So if I'm just judging season 1 Luthor, he's just okay. I could see him being a much bigger threat as this show goes along. But what about the other villains? Well, this is where I have to talk about the show's flaws. And a lot of them do revolve some of the other villains. One, some of the other villains aren't as memorable to me. They aren't the worst, but they're not as interesting. Second, while I don't mind the idea of them using tech to commit crimes, and some of them do come from the same secret government task force that's trying to take Superman down, it did get a little old seeing that a lot. Not saying it was bad, but I do think there should be a little more variety. Third, some of the villain costumes are not as cool as others. I mean, you have Deathstroke, Parasite, and Mr. Mystic Pitalik, who look good, but then you have Silver Banshee, Roughhouse, Mist. Their designs are just not as fun. And fourth, those names I mentioned before, Banshee, Roughhouse, and Mist, I did struggle to remember their names, and that is not a good sign. Maybe they'll get better development next season that makes them stand out more, or maybe we'll never see them again, I don't know. But I want to see these big Superman villains as incredible threats. Hopefully season 2 makes Brainiac and General Zod awesome, but we won't know until we get it. So yeah, I guess my only issues are some weak aspects about the villains, not all, but some, a few rushed bits in the story, and maybe a few jokes that don't work for me. It can have funny stuff, but it's not exactly a laugh riot. It's more of a sweet and inspirational kind of show. It doesn't have to be a comedy. Aside from that, those are all my gripes. But there are a few extra things I want to discuss. Right off the bat, it is surprising that a show on Adult Swim doesn't try to be adult. You know what I mean? Even when Adult Swim is at its best, it does lean on that childish adult humor a lot. Whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing is up to you, but I still kind of see that as kind of a crutch. But this show doesn't really do that. It's an Adult Swim show, but only by name. I could honestly see this airing on Cartoon Network. Although, with the state Cartoon Network and other networks are in, putting it on Adult Swim may have been wise. But now we have to talk about the biggest elephant I see in the room. The most controversial aspect that came out of this show. And no, it's not Lois and Jimmy's designs. They look fine. If you got a problem with how they look, what does that say about you? No, I'm talking about the big secret identity debate, which sprung up around episodes 5 and 6. Let me explain. For me personally, for the first 4 episodes of this show, I didn't see that many people on social media bashing Lois. In fact, there were a lot of accounts that absolutely loved her. They loved her character, her personality, her look, all that kind of stuff. But when episode 5 came out, the tune changed. Suddenly, a lot of accounts started to really bash her character about everything. That was sparked because this was the episode where Lois tries to get Clark to reveal his secret, he keeps lying about it, but he eventually does reveal it, and it causes a rift between him and Lois. This started a big debate about the importance or unimportance of secret identities. How important are they? Should Clark have kept it? Should Clark have been more honest? There were people comparing this problem with other superheroes like Spider-Man and Invincible. Hell, I even did a review on the Spectacular Spider-Man episode people used in this debate, especially the clip of Captain Stacy and his words on heroes in masks. I even gave my take about it in that review. Whether it goes super well for Peter one day or bad in another, he must keep that secret. Secrets may poison relationships and make things tricky, but he has to do it in order to keep everyone safe. And again, whatever he does with his secret identity is his business, and he just has to do what he knows is right. So now you're probably thinking, if Spider-Man had the right to his secret identity, like you said, what about Superman? Lois pressured Clark into revealing it. That makes her look bad, especially when Jimmy knew about it long ago and didn't do anything but wait until Clark was ready. You must think this is out of character for Lois and makes her look awful, right? Well, sorry to say, but I disagree. For a lot of reasons. I'll list them all. Number 1, that take I had was about Spider-Man specifically in that show, not Superman in this show or any other hero. Both are different heroes with their own lives, different backgrounds, personalities, powers, allies, villains, etc. So comparing these two just seems a little unfair to me. Number 2, Spidey in most versions is in high school or college, which makes hiding a secret much harder and more important. He also has more friends and allies to keep safe. For Clark, he's an adult now. He's in his 20s and on his own, living in an apartment, which is something I do. For him, he doesn't have that many close friends. Aside from his parents, Lois and Jimmy, there's no one else that's truly close to him. And since the show's biggest strength is the trio's dynamic, it makes more sense for Clark to eventually tell his secret to them. Hell, it was indicated that it was gonna happen in the show's intro. Details, guys, they are important. Number 3, Lois gave Clark multiple chances to talk to her about it, but he kept lying. Remember, these two have become quite close by episode 5. If I was Lois in this situation, I too would get agitated that my closest friend couldn't be honest with me. Number 4, Clark is terrible at lying. He's shy, stammers over his words, acts flustered when Lois is around. I get why he kept it up, but we all knew that the secret he was keeping from Lois was gonna come out. Again, I get why he tried to keep it, but he was just so bad at it. And Lois ain't a dummy. She was gonna figure it out. Hell, she figured it out by the end of episode 4 and tried to have Clark let her know right then and there. Like, she gave him those opportunities, but again, Clark backed away. Number 5, yes, her jumping off a building is extreme, but it's not out of character for Lois in the show and in other versions. I mean, this is the same Lois who lied to her boss and friends so she could get a big story, stole press reporter badges, impersonated those people so she could get into a maximum security prison, and took a prison cell key card. She's willing to take a lot of risks to get what she needs to expose the villains and get the story. Plus, we've seen Lois put herself in peril before to get Clark to reveal his secret. It happened in Superman 2, whether jumping into a waterfall or jumping out the window on a high building. And a lot of people I know love this version of Lois. Hell, that kind of crap even happened in the old comics. Whether you see that as funny, clever, insane, good, or bad is up to you. But to call it out of character? No. Number 6, in episode 4, we learn more about Lois's upbringing and her strained relationship with her father. They're not exactly open with each other about their problems or secrets. Also, Lois is an intern, but she's been stuck in that internship for a year. And if you really want to know how ridiculous that is, I was in an internship and that only lasted a month and a half. If I was stuck in that for a year, I'd probably go insane. So I'm glad she didn't. Basically, all she wants to do is help Metropolis through her reporting. She wants to finally have that big break. She wants to make a difference. It makes you understand her more and why she hates it when the people closest to her keep things from her. Number 7, keeping things from other people is a lesson Lois had to learn in episode 1. Clark called her out on it. Lois eventually learned her lesson, and this solidified her, Clark, and Jimmy as a unit. So, when you take all that into context, you can see why Lois would feel betrayed and even used when Clark, the best person in her life, can't be open with her about something this big. Could the situation have been handled differently? Yes. But that's the point. Conflict is an important aspect of making your stories interesting. If you have no conflict, your stories could be seen as boring, not interesting, and makes you wonder why you should be invested in it. The show does show us that communication means everything. And number 8, Clark and Lois resolve this by communicating in the very next episode. They talk about it, they open up to each other more, and eventually patch things up by the end. It's like some of the conflicts that were handled between Luce and Amity in the Owl House, particularly in Reaching Out. It is there, but they talk about it, come to an understanding, and come out better thanks to that. And that's exactly what happened with Clark and Lois here. And number 9, if you're gonna bring up the kryptonite thing, let me ask you this. How exactly would you bring up to your alien boyfriend that there is a green glowing rock that not only comes from your home planet, but could potentially kill you? And when I say kill you, I don't just mean, oh, it makes me feel weak and stuff like that. No, it makes it look like Clark is possessed and it looks like it's just taking over his entire body. Just one side of that or one touch of that makes him look like this. Besides, it was part of Mr. Mystic Pidalick's plan to create problems. Like I said, he's an annoying bugger, and if you don't have conflict, your story is not going to be compelling or interesting. I wish life could be simpler, but it just isn't, okay? So those are all my reasons. Do I expect all of you to agree with me? No. Every one of you has a right to your opinion. All I ask is that you simply understand where I'm coming from. And sometimes, looking more closely at certain things can help you see the bigger picture. That is all. Now, in conclusion, this show so far is super. Yeah, best adjective I could think of, sorry. Not perfect, but it is solid. So the final score I'll give Season 1 of My Adventures with Superman is an 8.5 out of 10. It's a sweet show, it has nice action, it has decent writing, it has characters you can be invested in, and it is very enjoyable. And I cannot wait for Season 2. Alright guys, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Let me know in the comments below if you liked the first season, didn't like it, or thought it was okay. I would love to hear your thoughts about it. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, my name is Sam, and good night everybody.